Aladdin is directed by Guy Ritchie, and this is the newest live-action adaptation of one of Disney's most beloved films of the same name. I'm just going to assume that most of you know what Aladdin is about, because chances are you've probably seen it. And interestingly enough, what I just did to start this review is kind of what this movie does to start this film. A good chunk of what this film's first opening minutes are essentially just fast-forwarding some of the first scenes of the original Aladdin. I suppose this is done because the filmmakers are probably just assuming that you are familiar with the story and that you know what this movie is kind of about. And I kind of just want to pause right there and just kind of unpack that idea. In recent years, Disney has attempted to revitalize some of their most beloved classics by adapting them from animated to live action. Now, for the most part, as I'm sure some of you know, I haven't really enjoyed them. Aside from Cinderella, which I still have not seen, I think the only attempt that they've done that I feel has been done successfully has been The Jungle Book. This year alone, we are getting 3 attempts at these live action adaptations, first with Dumbo, now with Aladdin, and then later we have The Lion King. Now, I didn't have the opportunity to review Dumbo on this channel, but suffice it to say, I really didn't care for the film. Now, there are really only 2 reasons I can think of why creatively Disney would want to remake these movies. Now, of course, the main reason that I think that they are remaking these movies is probably money. Now, I think that's the cynical side in me, but Disney is a business and these movies do make money. But I think that there are only 2 reasons, again, creatively, why Disney is so hard-pressed to make these films. The first of which being that they think that they can actually improve on what was done in the first film. Now, obviously, Disney isn't going to come out and say, you know what, guys, that Jungle Book was a real turd. I think we can actually do that better today. Now, they're obviously never going to say that, but I think more oftentimes than not, it would be a bit naive for them to assume that their attempt would be better than the original product. Especially so in the cases of Aladdin and The Lion King, 2 absolute pillars of what Disney animation is. Chances are you're not going to top those films, so the only other reason that I can think of why they would want to remake these movies is to perhaps show these films and introduce these stories to a new audience. Now, look, there are a lot of complaints that people could make about the current landscape of what Disney is, but I don't think anybody is saying, you know what the problem is? Not enough people are watching Disney movies. Sure, movies like The Jungle Book, I don't think a lot of kiddos these days are just popping that one and watching it on repeat, but movies like Aladdin and The Lion King, what are you talking about? So many kids have still grown up on those movies because they're timeless. Even 27 years later with Aladdin, that movie still holds up. The animation in both those films still look incredible, but you know what really hasn't held up all these years later? The computer-generated effects in both of those films. In that Cave of Wonder sequence, those CG effects don't really hold up anymore, but the animation in the rest of the movie is evergreen. It's never not going to look good. Now, guess what? Not only this movie, but all of these Disney live-action adaptations have a lot of CGI effects. Every year, there are improvements that are made with computer-generated effects. There are things that looked good then that just don't look as good now. That just makes sense. Now, I have a feeling that there are multiple things in this movie that when this film gets to be the same age as the original Aladdin, I don't think that they're going to hold up as well as that film. You want to know how I know that? Because they don't even look good today. Aladdin is a truly ugly film. There are dozens of shots in this film that look absolutely atrocious. The CG at times can be laughable in this film, and I just don't for the life of me understand what the point is of remaking these movies only to shroud most of the film in computer-generated effects. Yes, I understand that a young boy isn't really able to interact with a panther. I get that. I understand that there are limitations to what you can do with practical effects, but I don't understand what the point is in this movie of dismissing the absolutely gorgeous location that this film takes place in and just putting a bunch of green screen in this movie that oftentimes looks terrible. If there's any studio that has the money to shell out and to give movies like these the spectacle that they deserve, the types of spectacle that David Lean was able to deliver 60 years ago, it should be these Disney films that have more money than they even know what to do with. So yeah, this movie's real in the sense that it's tangible, like the actors that are in this film actually exist in real life, but there's not really anything about this movie that feels authentic. It all feels fabricated and hollow, which is the antithesis of what Disney is known for. This is a studio that is supposed to bring magic to the screen and bring out the inner child in all of us. But if I'm being honest, for myself personally, at no point in this entire movie did I feel that there was any awe or wonder in this entire film. This is a pretty lifeless movie that I don't even think most children would be interested in. This film is nearly 40 minutes longer than the original Aladdin, and I think most parents, if you gave them the option of showing their child this movie or the original Aladdin, I think you would have to be outside of your mind if you even considered showing them this film over the original. Now, after the absolutely tragic passing of the great Robin Williams, I know myself and a vast majority of people were very hesitant and very nervous about what this film would do in regards to one of the most well-known and a character that is so inseparable and so synonymous with its actor that portrays them. Of course, I'm talking about the genie. What he did in that movie is not something that can be replicated by anyone. No one. It's not going to happen. But I did know that going into this movie. If I was to go into this film expecting Will Smith to somehow top what Robin Williams was able to do with that character, I'm going to be setting myself up for disappointment. So I chose to implement the same philosophy that I took when approaching Jared Leto's Joker. In both cases, you have an actor who is portraying a character so well that their performance is inseparable from that character. You just cannot talk about Heath Ledger without bringing up the Joker, and I believe the same can be said about Robin Williams in regards to the genie. So when approaching the new version of the Joker, I was like, okay, I understand that you're not going to be able to improve or replicate what the previous actor did, so I understand that they have to do something completely different. So when I was watching this movie, I was trying to be as objective as possible and see Will Smith and see the best that he can bring to this character and try to separate it as much as I can from Robin Williams. The only problem with that is this film kind of insists on making the audience compare the two. There are many moments in this movie in which they rip dialogue directly from the previous film. And so when they do that, it's impossible not to compare the two, which I feel is an issue that I had with a lot of this version of the genie. When Will Smith is in human form and is interacting with Aladdin, the character really worked for me. He's charming, he's charismatic, he's funny. He's exactly what you hope Will Smith would bring to this character. However, when he is in genie form, I just couldn't connect with this character at all, and a part of that is for a couple of reasons. One of those is what I mentioned before, with them just straight up trying to duplicate what Robin Williams did and not letting Will Smith be Will Smith. And part of it is that more oftentimes than not, the special effects in this movie just look absolutely horrible. Yeah, there are a few shots in this movie where he actually looks really good, but the rest of the 97% of this film, he looks terrible. And that kind of just harkens back to the fabrication element that I was talking about earlier. Let's talk about the director of this film, Guy Ritchie, who in recent years, his filmography has been hit and miss with me, to say the least. I really loved The Man from U.N.C.L.E., but I really didn't care for King Arthur. And I think that his influence and the kind of Guy Ritchie-isms that you would expect this movie to have, I didn't really find them to be there. There are a couple of chase sequences that happen earlier in the film where I could see Guy Ritchie kind of seep through a little bit more, but his sensibilities for the majority of this film, I just didn't really find his stamp kind of anywhere in this movie. In addition to that, Guy Ritchie has never directed a musical before. Aladdin is his first musical that he's ever done, and in a lot of cases, it really shows, which is unfortunate because, as I said, a lot of the actors that are involved in this movie can do really as much of a good job as you could ask from them given the material that they have to work with. But I think by far and away, the standout of this film is Princess Jasmine, who is portrayed so well by Naomi Scott. And not only does she do a wonderful job with her performance, but I actually think they add a lot of layers and complexity to her character in a way that was lacking from the first film. But unfortunately, I'd say everyone else in this movie, even with Aladdin, I don't don't even think that they're really worth mentioning. They are completely serviceable in their role, but I just don't feel that they really add or subtract anything from this film. And honestly, and it pains me to say this, but I feel that most of the actors in this movie probably do as good of a job as most of the people working at Disney World right now. And I think for the most part, that's kind of how I feel about most, if not all, of these live-action adaptation remakes. With most of these films, like Beauty and the Beast and Dumbo, I haven't thought about these movies one time since I left the theater, and I've really only given thought to these movies when I start talking about these live-action adaptation remakes. These films just phase through me like they're nothing. These movies just feel so hollow and so lifeless, which again, that's the exact opposite of what Disney is supposed to be. So did you guys see Aladdin? What did you think about it? Leave your thoughts and opinions down below. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching today. I hope you liked today's video. And if you did, you can click on the link down below and subscribe to my channel to see more movie reviews and movie related things. Guys, thank you so much for watching and see you next time.